their organization intervened in a 6-month-old baby being abused in this way, and on a sex cam, people were paying a subscription from 11 to 15, forced to sleep with between 7 and 15 men every single night. That was her words. The life expectancy of a child is about 7 years once they get sucked into that life of being trafficked. A young girl wants to know that she is enough. Society and media saying you're not enough of anything. It's impossible. It's impossible to have a child prostitute. Read the lyrics of the people that sang in the LA halftime Super Bowl. Look up their music. Read those lyrics, and they're talking about glorifying and normalizing sexual abuse.
The same people say there's nothing wrong with prostitution, right? Okay, no problem. So would you like your daughter, your wife, your mom to be a prostitute? No, that's different. No, that's not different. You're just saying that other people are worse and you're better than them. So they can be prostitutes, sex workers, you name it. But your family members, they can't.
Parents have to step up, have to wake up. Parents have to wake up to the dangers that's out there.
Do you think pedophiles were created by God this way, or they managed to become ones?
That's a great question.
So Alan, I want to thank you first of all for the things that you do for the society, for the humanity. That's a big deal. I want to thank you for your book, the one that you wrote. I believe absolutely every human being on planet Earth should read this book. Today I want to talk about, obviously, the horror that is going on right now in the world with the human trafficking, the child exploitation, sex exploitation, etc. So I'm gonna refer a lot to the book that you wrote, and I have a lot of questions, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Thanks for having me. I look forward to it.
So Alan, there were a few movies in my lifetime which I watched and they did an impact to me, right? So in year 2001, I want to say, I watched Requiem for a Dream. Have you seen this movie?
I don't think I have.
About drug addicts. Amazing movie. So everybody, if you haven't seen the movie, so it's about drug addiction and drug addiction teens, grown-ups, and a lady, when she was like, I want to say 50 to 60 years old, she was addicted to drugs that helped her to trim her waist and lose weight. So that did a huge impact on me. So I had an idea right away, drugs are just not for me. I can't touch it, right? A few years later, so I'm 35 years old, I'm originally from Lithuania, so former USSR, so the culture mix, so I speak Russian, Russian is my native language. So I speak Russian, I graduated school in Russia, Russian school in Lithuania. So in 2002, I want to say, there was a very low budget movie, Russian movie called Lily Forever. And that movie was about a girl that was living in Russia in a small town that got trafficked to Sweden. And that was a very hard movie to watch, even right now when I'm 35, right? They were showing such details, it hurt my stomach. I wanted to throw up a few times watching that movie. So that did a huge impact on me. So the way that some people, bad people behave with women and children is not appropriate. And when I saw that movie, I was like, okay, I got it. I have to be aware of the stuff that's going on. Last year, 2023, one of the biggest movie hits, I believe, was The Sound of Freedom, correct?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they watched the movie, they said, I had no idea this is going on in the world. This is going on even in our country, in America. The US is the #1 market consuming those, don't want to say product, but consuming the content, sexual exploitation of children trafficking, human trafficking, etc. So I want to do this podcast and start from the bottom, right? Let's start with the victims. Who are the victims? Boys, percentage-wise, boys, girls, women, how many percentage are even men, grown-up men?
Yeah, boy, that's a lot. We have a lot of ground to cover for sure. Maybe just to back up a little bit, my place in this fight is I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Saving Innocence. We're based in Los Angeles. It's about a 14-year-old organization. And so So a lot of the content from that book, a lot of the survivors that speak in the book, they're ones that I came in contact with and worked closely with at Saving Innocence. And so various statistics and things that I may be aware of are really focused in the kind of greater Los Angeles area. And that might look different than North Dakota or, some other part of the world. But we're aware of those stats that are out there. So just to calibrate who I am and some of my frame of reference. Who are the victims? Is that the question?
Yeah.
About 80% of the victims of human trafficking in this country are coming out of the foster care program. So these are kids that already had their family and life disrupted, blown up. They've already been abused and neglected. Oftentimes sexual abuse from a very early young age by those who were closest to them, some family members, maybe an uncle or a neighbor.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's get a little bit into details. So at a very young age, the age of what, 3?
Yeah.
Just like Jessica was? She was abused at 3 years old?
Oftentimes, younger than that, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years old, oftentimes.
Sexually abused?
Yes.
At 3 years old?
Yeah, many of them at that age. Sexual abuse in the home. And sometimes, if you can believe this, I know you have one child, if you can believe that a lot of times the early trafficking and early abuse is coming from the parents, which is hard to believe. I have 2 kids of my own, and I can't imagine that. But that's the reality.
Once again, I don't want this podcast to be vanilla. I want for people to watch this and get even sick of it, right?
Okay.
So, with all the respect, what do predators do to a 3-year-old? Boys and girls, they sexually abuse them?
Yes.
Like with their penises?
Yes.
They rape the 3-year-olds?
And sometimes even younger than that.
How is it physically possible?
It's
a very small child. It's like this tall.
It doesn't happen without injury. For those extreme sexual abuse cases, there's an injury that happens for sure. And there's sickening, ugly stories of babies being sexually abused and being trafficked. Babies. I had a friend just 2 days ago. We were driving, and he worked for an organization that did a lot of international work, and they intervened. Their organization intervened in a 6-month-old baby being abused in this way, and on a sex cam. People were paying a subscription, and on the camera, and they would pay money and then tell the person on the other side, do this, do that, while they watched to a 6-month-old baby, if you can imagine that. We're talking pure evil is what we're talking about. This is not a broken system. We can't fix it passing a certain law or getting some signatures on something or voting a new person into office. Some of those things can help, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But what we're talking about is pure evil running rampant and running wild in the world. So in our setting here, we see the average age of entry is around 12 years old. That's the average age. My co-author, who you mentioned, Jessica, she was abused in a sexual way, in other ways, from a very young age, 3, 4, 5, 6, and those early years. And then at 11, she began to get exploited and trafficked, and that went for 10 years. And that story happens over and over and over again. Another one of our contributors here, one of my favorite people in the world, went on the record on a video. You can find it at savinginnocence.org, where I work, and right on the homepage there's a video of one of my favorite people named Ori, who goes on the record talking about how she was from 11 to 15, forced to sleep with between 7 and 15 men every single night. That was her words. And then she said, by the time I was 12, I had already been raped 4,000 times. 4,000 times. So what we're talking about here is over the top. And I found that there's a thin line between people that don't know and they don't want to know. It's much easier to turn a blind eye, look the other way, maybe be aware of something ugly out there, but it's too uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's too unsettling for most people to stomach it. And if you actually get close enough to look at it, you're forced to react. You're forced to intervene, to be part of it. Or that inner battle of, am I going to be part of it or not? And that's an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the typical victim is someone who's been abused at an very early age, and then somewhere around 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, a predator, otherwise known as a trafficker, or the street name as a pimp, spots the vulnerability that's been created by that person's earlier life circumstances. And he comes alongside and begins telling her everything that she's ever wanted to know, that she's beautiful and that she's valuable, and the two of them can have a life together. And so that young victim gravitates towards that predator who has bad intentions the entire time, and he's manipulating her, he's brainwashing her, he's lying to her, and then at some point forcing her to go along with his plans. And now she's sucked into this dark world she didn't know existed. She's not sure how she even got there. She has no idea how to get out. And for that child who's already been placed in the foster care system, who doesn't have a solid family around her that loves her, no one's looking for her. It's been said that the life expectancy of a child is about 7 years once they get sucked into that life of being trafficked, unless somebody jumps in, intervenes, and pulls them out. And we've seen that all too tragically at Saving Innocence. We've had far too many memorial services for the kids that we serve that have lost their lives one way or the other.
Out of 100 victims, percentage-wise, how many boys and girls?
What we've seen in our setting is about 95% girls and 5% boys. So it's mostly young girls.
Okay. Human trafficking, out of 100%, how many, percentage-wise, approximately, adults and children? 50-50?
You know, that's a stat that's available on Google. At the top of my head, I don't know what the answer to that worldwide. It probably close to 50% children. I think it's slightly less in terms of the recorded stat. 30 or 40% are minors, but depending on what setting you're talking about and what part of the world, that could vary.
Yeah, because once they start at 14, at 18, they're already adults, but they're working only for 4 years. So if they're working like for a decade,
yeah.
So they started as a teen. Right. Then they got it.
Yeah.
Adult men, are they being involved as a victim in a human traffic?
There's certainly some adult men that are victims, but they've most likely entered that at a younger age before they turned 18, before they were adults. They've most likely entered. Like I said, the average age of entry is about 12 to 14 years old. So those that continue to be entrapped in that become an adult, but they probably didn't enter when they were an adult.
Okay, I got you. So I want to quote from your book. So what was their childhood like growing up? What are some of the factors that created their vulnerability? Why don't they run away from the trafficker? What is the mindset while they are being exploited? What is their relationship with their pimp like? So just like you told me, 80% they come from foster homes, right? So they have never had father figure in home. If they had like Jessica, right? She had a stepfather who was, that's not a human being. No. So he was exploiting her sexually from 3 years old. He was putting her under the water. He was putting her in the oven. I was like sickening just by reading this stuff. So victims, they're just looking for a father, for just like they say, a daddy. You want to make a daddy happy, so you got to work.
Yeah, there's a massive hole in a child's heart when dad is either missing or is a negative or harmful influence on that young child. And that's not to take anything away from moms and the women. There's so many strong, powerful women involved in this fight. I know a bunch of them. I'm just meeting one of them, a survivor out in front here, and handed her something. She was borrowing a piece of equipment from us, and she's incredibly powerful and strong, like all of them are. But the missing ingredient is good, strong, healthy men playing their role. And so when we see a child growing up, you look at all the stats and you can find single parent households. Almost always the single parent is the mom there working a couple jobs, doing her best, and that dad is gone doing his own thing, and he's leaving this child that he birthed, his wife birthed, but he contributed that. And now there's a missing gap, and especially for both of them in different ways, but for young boys, they're desperately, as a young boy, is trying to figure out, who am I? And what am I supposed to be like when I grow up? How do I treat the little girls on the playground? How do I grow up and become a man and be a positive influence in the world? And if there's no male figure guiding him, then in that regard, then what happens is the lyrics of the popular song lyrics and the hip hop and all those things, all the other influences, all the social media when they get to that age, it's all a bunch of lies about masculinity and what healthy men should be like, how they should treat the world around us. And so this young boy with no father figure to put the boundaries on, put the guardrails on and let him witness, oh, that's what it's like. And it's not really articulated that way. Like the dad doesn't necessarily have to say, hey, do it like me. It's just that young boy is growing up, going to the restaurant. How does dad treat the server and the waitress around the streets, around the neighborhoods? Like, what is dad doing? That's what that little boy is going to do. And so it's incredibly important that our dads are healthy and strong and leading the right way. And if they're missing altogether, mom is great. She's killing it doing her role, but she can't demonstrate what it's like to be a man because she isn't one.
Yeah.
And she hasn't had that upbringing.
She doesn't have that energy.
So there's this vulnerability that a young girl has, and these are words I've heard from so many of our survivors, and some of them are in the book. In fact, Jessica talks about it at one point. With no dad, you feel unprotected from the world. You feel vulnerable. Just the simple fact that dad is not around, and now if dad's harming you, then that's a whole nother level. You know, have you ever seen that picture where there's various versions of this that's floating around where there's like a lion cub, like a little baby lion cub, and he's looking really tough and you know, kind of aggressive towards whatever's coming at him. But right behind him is this big dad, you know, like got his back. And that's why that little lion cub can feel strong and confident in the world, because he's got dad behind him backing him up. And so when that big dad is not behind him backing him up, figuratively or literally, then that young lion cub is vulnerable and exposed. And so these young girls, they want, our young survivors, our young victims, they want what every 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, 16-year-old girl, and any age of any demographic, all of us want to feel included and accepted and affirmed. A young girl wants to know that she is enough. Society and media saying you're not enough of anything. She wants to feel beautiful, wants to feel like someone's pursuing her. And when none of that is happening, here comes that trafficker. Sees her at a bus stop, sees her at the mall, out front of the school. He can spot that vulnerability, and he starts speaking into those vulnerabilities. And before long, she's off into that world, and it's sad.
So 2 quotes more from your book. So, she has usually witnessed abuse at an early age. She feels shame and guilt as she is being re-victimized over and over. Dad is not present physically and or emotionally. And then your friend Nola says, I thought sex was the most valuable thing I had to offer this world. I thought I was put on this earth to satisfy people sexually.
Yeah.
It's like their mission becomes just to sexually satisfy men.
For young girls growing up with those circumstances, through word and action, reinforced daily, they come to believe exactly what our friend Nola said. I just thought that's why I was here. That was my purpose in life. You know, we're all in some sense looking for our purpose in life. What are we supposed to do in this world? Make our mark. Well, for children growing up on this path, they begin to believe that's their purpose. And maybe they, in a way, settle into it. Okay, this is what I'm doing. And they might not try to run or fight it at some point. They give up, in a sense. Or they may try to say, no, this is not what I'm about. I don't want to do this. And then it gets very aggressive and very violent for them if they try to escape. So much to the point where they can lose their life.
So mom has to teach her daughter to say that your purpose is not to sexually satisfy men. But if there are bad relationship example in the family, when mom is being abused by a father or stepfather or just a regular man or multiple men, so the daughter sees the example, so she just does whatever her mom did.
It's oftentimes a generational curse, if you will, that's passed down. it'd be great if mom was healthy enough to give that proper guidance. But oftentimes, mom is living the same life or had lived the same life, and she's on her healing journey, and she's not necessarily in the place where she can give that guidance to that young child. And then fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, another kid or two, and it just keeps going unless we intervene and create a hard stop and begin to reprogram.
So Jessica explained her life story. When she was 3, her mom came back. She was living with a grandmother before that. Her mother came back. She brought a stepfather, a man, into the household, which started abusing her. Mm-hmm. Have you any idea what's going on in a woman's life, in a mother's head, when her child, her daughter, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 years old, is being sexually abused by her man? Why does not she intervene and say, hey, that's inappropriate? Why don't they call the police? Because there's one where they getting sexually abused themselves, mothers and women. But when the stepfather or just a male figure does the same thing for their children, for minors, that's the whole other story.
Yeah, you would think so. And certainly some do, and some guard their little one, like a mama bear. But so often there's this domestic violence cycle that happens. And in a weird, twisted way, that man who's in the picture, whether it's dad or boyfriend or husband or trafficker to a younger girl, in a weird, twisted way, he is supplying some of the basic necessities of life. He is providing sometimes some sort of emotional support. He is providing food and shelter oftentimes. So while it's terrible, through their eyes and their life experience, it's not all bad. There are some good points in there from their perspective. And then also, if this is a violent, abusing man, mom is probably living afraid and probably doesn't feel like she has the ability to speak out. Maybe she tried to speak out earlier and she got beat or worse. So there's just this ball of dysfunction, of hurt, of pain, and it's hard to break that cycle. Mm-hmm. Because now mom and daughter are now beginning to believe this is my existence. This is the best I can ever hope for. This is what I'm created for. This is why I'm here, to live this existence. And that's my boyfriend. I love him. He takes care of me. Is there reality?
That's a twisted love. That's a twisted type of love.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's not love at all. But from the perspective of someone who's had far worse, oftentimes, the young girls we work with, and some that were in that book, by the time the trafficker enters the picture, not only are they conditioned and vulnerable to receive whatever they're giving, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to them before, to being actually trafficked, bought and sold 6, 8, 10, 12 times a night. They've already received worse abuse at home. In fact, I think Jessica goes on the record of the book saying, I would rather be abused by people out in the world than the people that my family and people closest to me. It hurt more to be abused by them than strangers. So it's actually an upgrade in lifestyle. So
there's no option of not being abused at all. There are only 2 options,
right.
Either to the inner world or outer world. That's it.
Right.
Okay, let's go further. So, according to Ori, a lot of stuff in my childhood became normal. It became okay and normal for an adult male to touch me, and to touch me in the ways I didn't understand. It became okay because that's what I was used to. At a very early age, that was what I started to learn as the way you receive love. Mm-hmm. This is what it feels like when someone cares about you and shows your attention.
Yeah, that's Exhibit A right there. As a young girl, this happens before she ran away at 11 years old, mm-hmm. and went right into the arms of a trafficker who was going to meet all those needs. So when she's younger than that, 7, 8 years old, there's abuse in the home, and some uncle or some friend is touching her in a way that is, you and I would immediately say, you should be arrested. you better pray the cops get here before I get to you. I mean, this is not going to happen one more second. But there's no one to do that or say that. And so this abuse gets normalized at a young age. What does a kid know? I just saw your little kiddo. There's a lot of things about the world he doesn't know. And so whatever it is that you do, you and your wife do in and around in your son's existence, will be normal to him. Now, thankfully, your little guy is growing up in a healthy, normal, loving home. But he doesn't know the difference between a different version. It'll just be the normal existence that he grows up in. That's his normal. He doesn't know all that life has to offer until you show it to him. And if you never show it to him, and the only existence he ever has is abuse, that's what it is. And there's no one to tell him any different.
So are those people mentally ill that are grown-ups and they touch their children or other children, other minors in that way? They're just mentally ill? Something's wrong with their head?
The tragic reality of our world right now in certain parts of the world is there are certain pockets of people that are trying to normalize pedophilia. They're calling it minor attracted person. And so what has been considered a mental illness, what has been considered completely delusional, completely illegal, all the things, there's a group that's trying to shift that and erode that. Yes, it's a result of hurt people, mm-hmm. Broken people, break other people. So it's certainly the result. They most likely, 99%, the adults that are pursuing that, going down that path, it was done to them. And it was normalized to them. And so something is off as a young little human. And I'm not a psychologist, you can Google all the exact answers, those kinds of things. But as a young human, all that was done to them. And yes, it sent them down a path, a hurting path.
Yeah, but someone started that.
Yeah, right.
Someone was patient zero.
Yeah, right. That's right. Chicken or the egg? When did it start? I don't know. It's a generational curse. It's evil. It's brokenness. It's pain. It's suffering. And we're passing it down one generation at a time. So
just like you said, no more you can say pedophile. You have to say a minor attractive person.
You can. I will never say that. No. We won't give 1 inch on accepting that it's somehow normal. Absolutely not normal. And at this point, it's still illegal. Although there are certain places where they're loosening.
This word still bothers me. You said it's still illegal. It's like there's a timestamp when it's going to be legal.
Yeah. Well, there are certain places right now, and I can't quote it exactly, but I know there's certain places in our country where like there's an age limit. Like it's a worse penalty if you're too many years apart, but it's not as bad of a penalty if you're closer in age, but they're still a minor and you're sexually, it's all that. They're getting some gray area. People are creating gray area in this, which is absurd. And to my dying breath, I will not accept that it's normal and okay.
So calling a pedophile with MAP, that's the same thing as they call John. What's with the word John? Can you explain? Because that was the first time I heard about this term. What's that?
Yeah, typically a John has been a slang word for a sex buyer, someone who's buying sex, someone who is propositioning or getting proposition from someone on the street or online, and they're called a John. And I think it was probably back in the day, it was a way to minimize the crime. A lot of the reason why this is a fast-growing crime and so vast around the world is it's been misunderstood. The language hasn't backed up what's actually happened. No, they're not a John. They're a sex buyer. They're someone who's buying sex. And if they're doing it from a minor, they're a child abuser. They're a child rapist.
Yes.
That's what's happening. They're not a John. But John has been the slang, the euphemism for someone who's buying sex. And I talk about that in the book at one point. And I says, this is ridiculous. Let's call them what they are. I got a friend named John. A girlfriend who breaks up with her boyfriend's writes a Dear John letter. Like we're just diluting the entire thing by continuing to use language like that is not accurate.
And in the book, you're saying that we have to name the children that were abused or they were working in this area, in this industry. They have to be named a child prostitute. That's term.
That has been historically, you know, a lot of your viewers have probably heard the term child prostitute.
Which is impossible.
It's impossible. It's impossible to have a child prostitute. Here in our country, United States of America, I don't know about around the world or in Lithuania, but 18 is the federal age of consent for sex. So by definition, by legal definition, they can't consent. They can't say yes. By definition, it's illegal. And that carries a penalty and a crime. So the term prostitute has a derogatory connotation, and it suggests choice. It's all in the common understanding. It's like, oh, they're a prostitute. Oh, this person became a veterinarian. This person is a school teacher, and this person's a prostitute. Like it's almost like it's their choice. Mm-hmm. But we know that it's not their choice. We know that at 12 years old, most of them, they were sucked in through this way that we previously discussed. And now, if they're over 18, they're an adult, and they might be, quote, a prostitute in the eyes of the law. They're still being exploited. There's been a study, well-done study, that I think it said 88% of those in the sex industry want to get out, don't want to be there, but they don't see any other options. Mm-hmm. I quote that in the book. And so child prostitute is absurd. No, there's a child abuse victim. There's a child rape victim. There's no such thing as a child prostitute.
How about when we start naming prostitutes with sex workers? Do you agree with this term?
Well, there's terms that are out there that are commonly used, you know, and the law enforcement realms. Prostitute is one of them that's used. It's a legal word. Sex worker is a term that is used out there. I personally don't like it. Sex isn't work, and work isn't sex. Sex was created by God to be something beautiful and unifying.
To multiply.
And to multiply. It is not work. Out there in the world, there is the term sex worker. It kind of provides a little bit of understanding. I don't like it. I won't ever use it.
Because that's like engineer, doctor.
Again, yeah, right. It almost normalizes it. And
which is not legal
right.
in most of the countries. So you can't say that's just a regular profession. That's not a regular profession. That's not an engineer, doctor, or something else.
When you know, a lot of times in school, elementary school, 4th grade or something, they'll do a career day and they'll bring in some of the moms and dads and come in. And my dad did that when I was in 5th grade, I think, came in for an hour and they tell about their jobs, and somebody's a vet and somebody's a doctor and somebody's a teacher, and the kids learn about the different careers. At no time is there ever, quote, a prostitute there as a career choice. Right next to the school teacher and the whatever. There's not someone there, a sex worker or a prostitute out there, talking about how you get into this career. It isn't, and it should never be normalized, accepted. And so that's a big part of our job at Saving Innocence, is not only take care of these young victims and survivors and do all that work, but to also be a voice, a thought leader out in the nation and the world, along with so many others that are doing the same thing, and try to reframe this crime and help people understand this is a crime. It's not a choice. It's not an option. And just help everybody along the path understand it better.
Careers: sex worker, drug dealer, gun seller, pimp, trafficker.
Right.
A lot of options.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Let's go to the traffickers. Okay. So, profile of a trafficker. Mm-hmm. So you write in the book that a trafficker can be almost anybody. Mm-hmm. Your neighbor, even your friend, even your best friend. You'll never know that until you know. So a profile of a trafficker does not kind of exist. You can say that's from 35 to 60 male, but there are examples of a 90-year-old. One of your colleagues wrote that she had a client that she had a rapist that was 90 years old. And then she also tells a story when she had a father and a son, a teenager.
Yeah, right. So those are the buyers. That's not the traffickers, what you're describing.
Yeah, excuse me, yes.
So you want to talk about the traffickers or the buyers?
Let's go to the buyers.
Okay. Yeah, the buyers is the one with really no parameters. It could be anyone, and it is everyone. It's a school teacher. It's a cop. It's a pastor. It's a friend. It's a dentist. It's a little league coach. It's the guy next door. And that's where that section of the book, we go into some detail. There's no really one set profile. And maybe if you go to a certain part of a certain city, they'll kind of look more alike because that's who's living in that certain part of the city. But across the board, they're all different kinds. And part of my message, whenever I get an opportunity to sit in front of a microphone or write a book, is that I want to make sure that the men out there, and my lane is primarily men because, that's who I am. And so I speak to men, and men are the biggest part of the problem with all of this. It's mostly men. But I don't want to let men off the hook too easily because there's a lot of good men out there. Most of the men out there aren't buying sex,
yes.
And they're not certainly buying sex with a child. And so that man might be tempted, may have already turned it off. This isn't for me. I'm not doing that. I hope you're still listening, guys. Because what I urgently want to tell men is, if you aren't actively going down the dark path of buying sex and abusing adults or children, then there's a great chance you're passively just allowing it to happen. You're contributing to this dark criminal activity without even knowing it.
So, give me some examples, please.
For example, I don't know how many men understand that when they view pornography on their phone or their computer, most of the women on that screen don't want to be there. And some are actively being trafficked into that movie set, into that motel room. And that means they're being trafficked. They have no choice. They have to do it or they'll get killed. So they're being trafficked or otherwise coerced, manipulated. They don't want to be doing what you're watching on the screen. It's called non-consensual sex. What's the word for non-consensual sex? Rape. Now, most of the knuckleheads out there addicted to pornography or just dabbling with it don't understand that. And there's no button on the screen, there's no banner that lets you know this is truly consensual sex by adults. This is how they're making their money. You can watch if you want. It doesn't say that. You have no idea knowing if who you're watching on the screen is a minor or an adult, and you have no way of knowing if they're there consensually or non-consensually. So guys, can you possibly turn on your porn one more time? Can you even do it one more second knowing there's a great possibility you're watching somebody getting raped and you're receiving some kind of gratification from that? Whether you actually are paying money or just somehow viewing it for free, they're monetizing you. You're in a sense a sex buyer by just watching porn. You're contributing financially even if you didn't pay because they're monetizing, they're selling advertising on the clicks and the eyeballs that view their pornography. That's how this whole thing works. So that's an example of you're passively allowing it to happen and feeding this dark, ugly beast. How about the kind of music that you might be listening to? The kind of entertainment that you're consuming might not be out and out sex buying per se, like we've been discussing, but you are possibly contributing to those that are glorifying and normalizing sexual abuse. I was just on a little text thread with my buddies outside before I came in here, and we were talking about the NFL playoffs and everything, and somebody was mad about something, and we were going back and forth. And I said, 2 years ago, I boycotted the halftime of the Super Bowl because the NFL chose to put on the biggest musical gig in the world, maybe the biggest stage. They chose to put on people that have made millions of dollars glamorizing, celebrating sexual abuse. In fact, one guy is a former trafficker himself. You can look it up, gentlemen and ladies who are watching this. I'm not trying to get us in trouble here, but I'm just telling you, read the lyrics of the people that sang in the LA halftime Super Bowl. Look up their music. Read those lyrics, and they're talking about glorifying and normalizing sexual abuse. So I staged my own protest. Some friends are coming over to the Super Bowl. I said, okay, just so you know, we're going to watch the game. I'm a big fan of football, but we're turning off the TV halftime. If you want to watch it, you have to go someplace else. So I staged my own little mini protest. I'm sure the NFL is still reeling by the ratings they lost by my one house turning off that TV. But the point is, we have to take a stand at some point. Your kids are watching. Your friends are watching. Why aren't you watching the Super Bowl? Well, let me tell you why. Here, read the lyrics.
This becomes their norm.
These guys made millions of dollars by normalizing and celebrating sexual abuse of women. I'm not going to participate in that.
So in page 53 of your book, you say this. You may have heard that the Super Bowl is the biggest day of the year for human trafficking. And it might be. How so? I would never think of it.
So it's been historically thought of as the biggest human trafficking day in the country of the year. It may or may not be numerically. But basically, this crime follows people, follows entertainment. And that's why in a city like LA and a lot of other cities where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of sporting events, there's a lot of entertainment, there's a lot of conventions, airports coming and going. It's a destination city. Yeah. There's a lot of traffickers and people bringing their product, these young girls that they own, because there's a lot of demand for the product. So the Super Bowl is like a national holiday. Yeah. And everybody's watching the Super Bowl and the world converges on a particular city. This year it's in Las Vegas. Can you imagine that? So there's a lot of human trafficking that's going around because there's so many people coming in. They got extra money in their pocket. They already have money. If they're coming to the Super Bowl, they're traveling. They're spending money on a hotel, probably 10 times more than it normally would be priced. All the food, if they're going to the game itself. But a lot of people come to the game, the city, the week before, going to all the parties. They're not even going to the actual game. They're just part of the entertainment. And so there's a lot of trafficking that happens anytime something like that happens. I would urge the public and the media to don't gear up for the Super Bowl and then suddenly disengage. Okay, we got through that. We're done now. No, it's happening every day of the year in every major city and every minor city. It just so happens there's a concentration of publicity around the Super Bowl. But when the bright lights go off and all the journalists go home to their respective cities, it's still happening in LA and whatever city.
But it's not just about the gathering of people on the Super Bowl, right? It's about if that's a holiday, if that's some kind of a celebration, why don't I? My wife is at home. Why don't I buy some girls or boys or something like this? So it's kind of celebrating to the fullest, celebrating life, right?
Yeah.
Football, alcohol, maybe drugs, some sex here, some sex here.
Yeah.
Why not? I should pay for this. I got the money.
Yeah, and the mentality from that person, there's a couple different ways that a buyer would look at that. One is they're entitled. I'm a man. I have money. I can do what I want with those that I can have power over. If I'm married or not, if my wife's not around in another city, I came to the game with the boys, whether it's a Super Bowl or any night out on whatever night of the week. Yeah. We're celebrating. We're having a good time, and this is part of what we do. We've woven this into what our entertainment is. Hey, we're gonna go to the game. I got this new strip club down here. Let's go check out the strip club. Most of those girls don't want to be doing that either. Most of those girls have been abused in their life, and you're going to pay money. Maybe you're not having sex with them, but you're paying money to get through the door, and you're watching them do what they do, and they don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. So you are passively contributing to the proliferation of this crime.
You know what's crazy? This whole feminist movement is fighting for the rights of the women, but they don't do shit about strip clubs, for instance.
There's two different camps for sure. There are those women in that camp that would say this is what's liberating. Who are we to say that they shouldn't be able to do this if they choose to do it? And this is how they're going to make their money and feed their kids. There's that camp of people that's gaining a louder and louder voice. People like myself in the work that we do have a clear understanding that we shouldn't be legalizing, quote, sex work. We shouldn't be, the term is decriminalisation of prostitution. We shouldn't do that because now that's going to be the final straw of society turning our back on these, quote, prostitutes or sex workers who got manipulated or captured into it when they were 12 or 13 or 14 years old. They didn't have a choice. And now when they're 20 or 23 or 25, they might say, I want to do this. But then you peel that onion. And how do they get to the place where they want to do that? Well, you got to look at where they came from, 10, 12 years old. They don't know anything different. And there's some people right now that don't want me to say that. That's my opinion, and that's those that I work with. And the survivors that are in this book that you read that we're talking about, they would all agree. We cannot full decriminalize prostitution because it's pimps and brothel owners will just run with impunity. And, it's an interesting thing. There's some argument that says, well, if we decriminalize it and make it legal, then it becomes like a legal business, and then the government can tax, the pimps and the brothel owners. And so, in essence, the people that are in that camp are saying, you know what, our federal government should become the trafficker. The federal government becomes the trafficker because now they're taking a piece of the money.
Yeah, they're part of it.
It's like,
It's profitable.
oh, very profitable.
How can they stop that?
Incredibly
if that's profitable legally.
Yeah.
And if you're 17 years old and tomorrow is your 18th birthday, so you're just waiting for the next day to become a sex worker.
Yeah.
And you've been groomed for 5 years to do so. Mm-hmm. So imagine this. So there's soccer is not huge in the US, but it's huge in the whole world, right? So for soccer for the greatest players of all times, they start playing soccer since 5 years old, 7 years old. They go to those Barcelona, Real Madrid, those clubs, those small clubs for children when they're teaching how to play. Once they become 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe even 17 years old, they go to play for the big club, for the Real Madrid, for the Barcelona, etc. So you can do the same thing if that's legal. You're not going to have sex workers until she's or he is 13, 12, 14. But you can kind of teach them. You can groom them. But once they turn 18, welcome to the big leagues. It's legal. Why not?
Well, and the studies around the world, whenever there is legalized prostitution, it always is accompanied by minors being trafficked. That becomes the farm system, if you will. So teaching them how to do it in those early ages in your scenario means they're actually out there being raped a dozen times a night. They're working in that way. That's how they get taught how to do it. So there is no separation. Legally, if they were to legalize it, they would, I'm guessing, say 18 is the age. But what's going to accompany that? Because the demand's going to explode. Because now it's legal. Now I can do it.
How about fake IDs?
But so what'll happen is, since the demand grows, they have to meet that demand. The traffickers have to meet the demand. Well, I now have 10 times more customers. I don't have enough women. So now they're going to even more go recruit and groom and capture the young ones. It'd be a complete disaster.
You see, Alan, when they say that's their choice, that's a regular profession, right? Sex worker, a prostitute. But how about the moral side of it? Sex has always been some kind of a sacred. You have to earn sex, right? If you're a man, you have to earn a right to have sex with a woman. But right now, you have to earn money, which gives you an opportunity to have sex. And if it's legal, why do I have to go to dating, surprising my girlfriend, talking to her, going out, then marrying her, having some children? If all I want is sex, I just have to earn money. I earn money, I have sex. That's it.
It's not the way God intended it. That's for sure.
Family is pushed away from the circle.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, and I don't have all these stats off the tip of my tongue, but if we're going to go down that path and think of it as a legal profession that you can choose, then you look at all the professions, and then you'd have to look at sex work and the number of homicides that happen through that process, the number of physical and sexual abuse, of rapes. Like, when's the last time you heard of a Walmart worker being murdered on the job? Being raped at Walmart or McDonald's? Like, it almost never, ever, ever happens. But in, quote, the sex industry, there's homicides and rapes and abuses. And if it's going to be a legitimate workplace, now what are you going to do with that? You're going to legitimize that? It's very problematic.
See, Alan, I believe a lot of people think of having a prostitute as just a consensual sex, just a normal, regular sex, but which is not true. So once again, I'm going to quote something from your book. I had fantasized about sex with somebody other than my wife through pornography. Now I was living the fantasy, except the actual experience didn't match the illusion at all. But there was enough pleasure along with the cocktail of shame and self-hatred and guilt. The worst part of the night for me, worse than looking into the trusted face of my wife and kids on the holiest of nights, worse than all of that was the knowledge that I was going to do it again. Most of the times, people that buy sex, they have some kind of twisted sex in their mind. They want to do with the prostitute the things that they can do with their girlfriends or wives. Mm-hmm. That's when they hit the prostitutes. That's when they rape them. Sex is not enough for a lot of people. They want to rape them because they've seen something in a movie, in a pornography. Some heard, maybe they even experienced that in the childhood. So that's just not regular sex.
No. They can live out some sort of fetish or some sort of addiction that they've typically learned by watching pornography, and they can't do it with their wife. Their wife, maybe they've tried, but their wife wants no part of it. So now they can have someone that they have power over. They pay their money, they're entitled to whatever they want. And that particular gentleman that we were quoted there is a pastor of a church on his way to lead Christmas Eve service, and he has that encounter with someone on the street. It just shows how dark and twisted and how vulnerable males, again, women too, but mostly men, people that you wouldn't think are in this darkness. It's all around us.
I liked your saying in the book that men are the problem. 99% of the problem is men. But if the man is the problem, that means that man can solve this problem.
Yeah.
So there's a solution.
Well, see, that's the bright side of the equation that I preach whenever I can. In life, when you know what the problem is, let's just say something doesn't feel right with your body, or you had a fall and you hurt your knee somehow. You go to the doctor, they take an X-ray or an MRI or something. That if they can figure out, oh, that's the problem right there, now they can fix it. Usually,
yeah.
If your car is making a weird noise, you go see a mechanic. If you're not a car guy. He listened to it, he runs a few tests. Oh, yeah, it's that thing right there. We got to change that part. If you know what the problem is, then you have a great chance of creating a solution. Well, this is the good news of all this ugliness. We know what the problem is. The problem is men. It's us guys. Again, like I said earlier, you're either actively participating or you're passively just allowing it to happen. And when you know of something terrible happening and you refuse to do anything about it, then you're complicit in the very thing that is dark and ugly. Maybe you're not so far out actually actively working on it, but we need to step up into that solution. So guys, we're the problem. Great. We're 50% there. That means we know what the solution is. And we dedicate a lot of time in the book about talking about authentic masculinity and being a good, strong, positive man in the world that you live in, your home, your neighborhood, your kid's school. Start one step at a time. We get enough men living differently, understanding and living differently, then we have a chance at fixing this.
Yeah. Page 52. I had a fascinating experience when Captain Wagner invited me to join him on a ride along during a sting operation they were conducting in an undisclosed part of Los Angeles. I sat in a blacked out undercover car watching buyer after buyer stop and proposition a decoy. One after the other, men were handcuffed, fingerprinted, photographed, and taken to jail. In an instant, their lives were forever changed. The question is, from the moral side of it, can you do this kind of a setup? Can you do these setups just to get the ones that are willing to pay for sex?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's certain rules around it, but there's sting operations happening all the time in major cities and in LA. They're happening. They move around the city, and they either they've put an ad on the internet on various places where they do that, and a bunch of men show up at an address because they're expecting to have sex with a minor. They're expecting to pay money because it was in the ad, and they show up. They can get arrested. In this case, there's a decoy out on the street and has the look of someone who's for sale. Car slows down, then she's trained to have the right conversation, in terms of
not to provoke some kind.
And he says, "How much?" "Well, I don't know. What you have in mind?" And and she's like, everything's recorded. And what are you thinking about? And then he says, "I'll give you $20 or $50, and I want you to do this to me." That's intention. You can't arrest him for that. But then what would happen is she might say, "Okay, meet me around the corner." And if he takes that next step, it's called furtherance. If he takes the next step, it shows it's going from intention to action. So you can say, you have freedom of speech in this country. You can say stuff. You can say vulgar stuff and rude stuff. But now if you're acting on it, now that's enough to put handcuffs on and give you a night in jail.
Alan, the problem is with supply or demand. If there wasn't any supply, there wouldn't no demand.
Other way around.
Other way around.
Demand. It's all about demand. The supply meets the demand. So here's my little Apple iPhone right here. And, we all have some version of a smartphone. If for whatever reason we quit buying cell phones, some hypothetical space, How many more phones would Apple make if nobody was buying them? None. The supply follows the demand. So this is on us, guys. We're the demand mostly. We have this appetite to buy sex. And so therefore there's a market created. There's a marketplace. And so the people that are going to meet that market, it just go to your business 101 class that you took in community college or learned somewhere along the lines. Supply and demand, it's all the same things that happen in business. It's a commercial enterprise. You pay money for something, maybe at a restaurant, they bring you food, you eat it. You pay money every month for your phone, it works, you can talk to people. You pay money, you get something back. So this is what it is. Buyers are paying money, they're getting something in return. If there was no paying money, if there was no purchasing of sex, there'd be no reason to put somebody out on the street or on an online ad. There'd be no buyers.
So the solution for the problem would be get rid of demand or supply. We can't get rid of demand. There will always be men that are willing to pay for sex.
I think the ultimate solution, and we talk about it in the book. Yeah, you get the book, everyone, called Men Fight for Me. And by the way, proceeds are benefiting survivors, many of which are in the book and others. So I can unapologetically and humbly say, buy a case of books and give them to every guy you know. We do walk through solutions, possible solutions to the crime. It'll take all of the above. Let's create some better laws, some harsher penalties. Let's come alongside inner city kids because that's where a lot of the victims and future traffickers are. Let's give them opportunities and teach them about jobs that they can get, legitimate jobs. Let's come alongside broken families and help strengthen men to be better fathers. That'll help. At the end of the day, we need to stop the demand. And so there are ways laid out in that book where we can do that. Not to disregard all the other things that we could be doing, but at the end of the day, it's a business.
But demand is as old as the human history.
Yeah, right.
Caligula, the Roman Empire, all that stuff.
Yeah, right. We have to do a lot of things we outline in the book, like creating harsher penalties for buyers and those kinds of things will deter. There's a whole percentage of buyers that are otherwise upstanding citizens. The dentist in town, the Little League coach. If he knows he's going to be made famous for buying sex, he doesn't want to blow up his family. He doesn't want to blow up his marriage even though it seems like it's in jeopardy if he's actually doing it. He doesn't want to lose his business. He doesn't want to go to jail. He probably would not buy sex in that way. A lot of the people would. There's a lot that are down that path, and like you say, they're not going to be deterred.
But in that way, you don't get rid of a passion to buy sex. You just stop them from doing this.
It won't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight. But it is the answer. If we can get one man at a time giving leadership in his community of men, saying we're not doing this. Hey, I know that we've usually been going to the strip club on a Friday night. Guys, guess what? We're not doing that anymore. Why not? Well, because I'm not going to let us, and here's why. These girls don't want to be there. And now let's talk about pornography. And if you can get men leading with the men that they know, and suddenly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men are not doing that anymore. And then you have a little book club and read that book, and then you get their men to reach out to men. It seems like a long process. So that's why we have no time to waste. If you get men leading in their way, in their neighborhood, one city at a time, one street at a time, one school at a time, one town at a time, we can take a major dent in it. And maybe there's still going to always be stragglers trying to buy sex, and maybe the crime will still be happening at some level. I'd like to believe that we have the power to stamp it out. I'd like to believe that this is an evil that's happening, and good is going to win over evil. But it's not going to. We have to cross the tipping point until we have enough men that understand it. They see it for what it is, and they say, not on my watch. This is not going to happen in my neighborhood. The kids at my kids' school are not going to be vulnerable to the traffickers that are out there circling around. That's not happening here. Now, we need someone else, another group of people say, it's not happening here. There's a group here in L.A. Called Men Standing Against Trafficking. And they go stand out on Long Beach Boulevard, a commonly known track where kids and adults are put out on the street. They have these big giant signs, sex is not for sale, don't buy. They're making a scene, a commotion out on the street. People are honking. Is that taking a huge dent out of trafficking? We'll never know. But it's a bunch of men taking a stand, saying, not here on this street. I live in this community. How many communities, how many good men and good communities can we say, we're not doing this? And we're only going to elect people into office that are going to reinforce that, and they understand it, and they're not going to let it happen in their jurisdiction. Police chiefs, district attorneys, mayors, governors. If we can get enough people in power to understand it and not look the other way. Don't look the other way, governors. Don't look the other way, mayors, police chiefs, district attorneys. Understand this. Hear from survivors. Meet with people that are in this work. Understand the tragedy that's happening. And you can do things in the place of power that you reside in. You can create laws. You can create protocols that will make a big difference. We have to step up as men and say no more.
Well, it seems like we're direct in the direction of a wrong way, because just like we talked earlier, right? Not a pedophile, a MAP, not a prostitute, a sex worker. The penalties are less and less for the molesters, abusers, rapists, and etc.
In some places, it is going the wrong way. In other places, it's going the right way on a state-by-state basis and a community-by-community. It's sadly, there are some places that's going the wrong way, and that's frustrating.
Alan, I believe one of the biggest problems of the world is, in my opinion, is hypocrisy, right? So when people come to the power and they say socialism is the way, communism is the way, right? So we're going to get everybody equal. We're going to print a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. But in the meantime, the ones that are in power, they had all the opportunities. They have the Rolls Royces, the private jets, everything. So they're not equal as other just regular people in the country. So when people say, well, pornography is not the problem, right? So the question is, would you like your daughter to act as a sex actress? No, that's different. No, bro, that's not different. That's the same thing. The same people say there's nothing wrong with prostitution, right? Okay, no problem. So would you like your daughter, your wife, your mom to be a prostitute? No, that's different. No, that's not different. You're just saying that other people are worse and you're better than them. So they can be prostitutes, sex workers, you name it. But your family members, they can't. That's the problem. That's the hypocrisy.
Yeah. Sadly, it's going to take this crime happening really, really close to certain groups of men, to certain men, for them to take it seriously. Because right now they don't take it personally. So therefore they don't take it seriously. I would hate it if this happened, but there'd be some part of me, I don't even say in any scenario I would want it to happen, but for one of these guys to turn on his porn
and
see his own daughter on there because she's there against her will, that would shake that man to the core, I would hope. And it might take that to get that addicted man, addicted to pornography, to walk away from it and then fight it. For those that are in other elected positions, it might take a family member being exploited, captured into this. You know, the typical, we talked about this a little while ago, is that foster kid someone has been sexually abused and those kinds of things. But let's not fool ourselves. There are also, quote, good families, intact families in nice-looking neighborhoods where their kids are largely unsupervised on the internet. FBI at one point said there's 900,000 predators online at any given time. So here's your son or your daughter, 12, 13, 14 years old, in her bedroom. You mom and dad, you're putting on you have a great house, they're well-fed, you go on vacation, but they're online in your house and someone is pursuing them with bad intentions. And some of those kids, they meet up this person at the mall and they could be gone, outright kidnapped.
Or Rebecca's story. She went to the college. Nice family, good family. Everything was great.
That was Rachel.
Sorry, not Rebecca.
Yeah, Rachel's a great story. That one shook me. Chapter 3 of the book, it's her telling the story. And Rachel was an LA kid, two-parent home, goes away to college. She wasn't a foster kid. She wasn't abused by anyone close to her. Went away to school. Her junior year. I mean, she's not a 12-year-old. She's 19 or 20 years old. Great kid, smart. Gets approached by a well-spoken man in a three-piece suit with a business card. I know talent when I see it. Have you ever thought about doing any modeling? As a matter of fact, I have thought about that. I have an entryway. I have a modeling agency. She signs on after a little bit of time to his modeling agency. He has her home address, has her school address, parents' name, social security number, all the things that you do when you get a job. And then he says, okay, now here's your first job. Have sex with that guy in the car over there. It's like, what are you talking about? And he pulls out the parents' name and home address and, bitch, I own you now. Let's not get anybody hurt. And now she's stuck in this horror of totally against her will. It wasn't a slow erosion and she found herself in a spot. It just got flipped like that quickly. And now it's like, okay, do I get my parents and my roommate killed? Or do I just go along with what this guy's going to say? And the title of the book, Men Fight For Me, I was in we go into detail in that chapter. I was in an auditorium when I heard her one of these times sharing that story. She's on the stage and she says, for 5 months I was trying to get myself out of this and I couldn't figure it out. And then she says, I could no longer fight for myself. And here's the next line that inspired this book and changed my life. She said, I needed someone to fight for me. I'm in. I'll fight for you and you and you. I'm gonna see how many good men I can get to join this fight, because there's a whole bunch of survivors, millions of survivors, victims turning survivors out there that need someone to fight for them. And I keep thinking, my daughter was about the same age as Rachel. She went away to college. She came from a great home, a dad who loved her. What if she got captured into this? I would want people to fight for her. I would fight for her, but I would want other people in that. So I'm in. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I hope that thousands or millions of men that are watching this will join the fight and do what they can do.
At least passively.
Yeah.
Another quote of yours is, I could tell that half the time the buyer was acting on a whim. I would call him a situational abuser. For situational abuser, it doesn't matter if their victim is 13 or 30. So for these kind of buyers, for this kind of sick people, it's like buying a pair of sneakers when they go through the mall. Like, why? Oh, why not? I see a girl, I got $100, $200. No, why not? Here's the money.
Yeah, that's like the sting operation we talked about earlier. The girl's on the side of the street, dressed in a certain way, and these guys didn't know she was going to be there. They were just going home after work. And it's a spur of the moment, situational. He wasn't asking her age or her demographic or anything. Oh yeah, I got a little time. So they're not going after a particular age or a particular, look. It's just in that situation. That's what's available. That's what I'm going to take.
That's a very sad story.
Yeah, and there's other scenarios where you can choose.
But it means that we were created this way. A lot of men just thinking about having sex. Oh, here's the discount for sneakers. Why don't you buy these sneakers? Oh, there's a girl. Why not? Mm-hmm. I have $100.
Yeah, that's what was modeled to them in their own home. That's what's being modeled in society. That's what's being modeled in media. The portrayal of so many men in movies and TV shows, the portrayal of men and sex in the song lyrics of so many of the rich and famous singers and entertainers. And again, if there's not a strong, healthy dad, moms, keep going, you're doing a great job. But dads, we need you in the home. We need you in your kids' lives. Without that strong dad modeling what a good, strong man looks like, they go down this other dark path and no one's there to correct them.
And for both, for sons and daughters as well.
Yep.
50-50. They were under the impression that the victims are excited by the thought of having sex with different people. Mm-hmm. So it means that men cannot be monogamous, they're polygamous. They have to have multiple women. And the portrait of a man right now that we can see on social media is like, yeah, I'm an alpha male, right? I can't have just one woman. I have to have 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If we take a look at Islam, for instance, in the book, in the Quran, it is written you can have up to 4 wives. You have to provide for them all, yeah, but you can have up to 4 wives. So if that's even written in the holy book of Muslims, if that is shown on the social media, in the movies, right, then why not? I'm not the one who is going to have sex only with my wife or only with my girlfriend. Why shouldn't I have sex with other women? If I can't find one, if I can't afford one to go on a date, to provide for them, to live with them, etc., then I should just buy it. $100 and I'm good.
Yeah, it's all been normalized and glamorized and celebrated in our society. And so what's a young man to do but follow the celebration, follow what's normal.
Once again, father and son, right? Page 57, just like I have mentioned this earlier. One time I had a father and son duo. It was sort of like a rite of passage that the father provided for his son. I believe that's one of the most sad story in the book.
Yeah.
Father and the son?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine bringing my 14-year-old, 16-year-old son just to have sex, for me to have sex with the prostitute and then him having sex with the prostitute. That's going to twist his mind right away.
Yeah.
By watching, his dad is watching like when he's having sex with a prostitute. That's it, he's done. He's going to get a shrink and he's going to visit the shrink for 10 years to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, think about the path that little boy is on. His dad, who he probably looks up to and respects and loves, is saying, this is how you do life. And so where's he going to be 10 years from there? 10 years. He's going to be doing the same thing. It just keeps being passed down from generation to generation.
If you can't earn sex, you can buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Just buy it.
We're entitled.
If you can't earn money for the sneakers, you can steal them. Go and steal the sneakers. Why not?
Yeah.
Another great example in the book. So if the victim is black, she's not allowed to date a black buyer. The pimp feels threatened by a black customer and fears he will lose his property. How so?
So this is Jessica telling her story. She's an African-American woman, was trafficked in Los Angeles, and in her setting, most, if not all, the pimps were black men. That's maybe not be true in every setting, in every scenario, but in her setting, it was. And yeah, so I mean, that pimp, who's a black man, is just going to assume that a black man buying his product, Jessica, is trying to steal her because he's assuming that he's a pimp. So he doesn't want to lose his product to a fellow pimp. So you're not allowed to date. They call it date. You're not allowed to date a black man because there's a good possibility he's going to steal you from me and make you his.
Buyers, right? They were just hurt, lonely men who wanted some form of intimacy. Many of them are angry they cannot find a girlfriend, or angry their relationship with their wife isn't how they imagined it would be, or are as busy with the work they justify purchasing sex as the most efficient way to meet their needs. So it's not always just about sex. There's some kind of some percentage of men that buy sex just to get intimacy, maybe to have a conversation. Is that
There's a lot of lonely, hurting men out there, and Jessica goes on to say in that little space, there a lot of these men meant me no harm. Like a lot of them weren't violent, weren't aggressive, they weren't trying to hurt her. They just were desperate for intimacy and closeness, a companion, and so they would pay her. I don't know if you're going to read this next or not, but in that space there was an older man who wanted her to dress up in his wife's nightgown and like he's remembering his deceased wife. Obviously he's hurting and twisted, and that's a hard way to go about it, but that was his reality. Another, I think it was a fireman that she saw on a regular basis. There were times he would drop off money to her and they wouldn't even get together. It's like he was going out of town or going maybe on a 3-day long shift or something. And hey, here, take care of yourself. Like he wasn't trying to hurt her. It was almost like a boyfriend and girlfriend. Yeah. Like, I'm going to take care of you. So there's a whole spectrum. There's the violent, aggressive, entitled, I'm going to take what I want, I'm going to do it right now, let's do it again, and we're going to do things that you've never done before, and it's going to be painful. There's that. And then there's the lonely, elderly man who doesn't know how to find companionship in another way.
The range is so wide.
Yeah.
So you said about this very crazy story when an old man paid for her to dress as her late wife. Yeah. The question is this. So what do you think, what are your opinion on the Japanese craziness that they have in Japan? For instance, you can go to Japan and there is those machines, vending machines, where you can buy used panties.
Oh,
So that's pervert.
I don't know. I've never heard about that. I don't know that.
In Japan, there is a lot of crazy stuff. For instance, how they portray students or pupils, girls, in the video games, always dressed like a student, and they're sexualizing it. So the girl or the character in the game is, for instance, a girl, 18, 14, 15, 20 years old, but she's dressed like a pupil, like a student, and she's over-sexualized with big breasts, with very short skirt, and etc. This is not good. This is some kind of provoking once again.
Yeah.
Oh, this character in the video game, she looks very sexy.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go for students, for minors.
Well, that's not just only Japan. That's part of this bigger problem. We're over-sexualizing everything in our society and our culture. And so you got young 12, 13-year-old boys or whatever age playing, Grand Theft Auto and these other really popular video games, and you get points for murdering somebody. You get points for getting a, quote, prostitute, and there's, they're portrayed in animation, which is now pretty realistic. And we're teaching our young boys, this is the world that you live in. It's okay to run people over and shoot them and kill them and buy prostitutes, and it's in the video game. And mom and dad are buying them the video game, and all the friends have it, so it must be okay. Like, how are they interpreting, how's that 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old interpreting the world? I guess this is what I should be doing. Because no one seems to be having a problem with it. My own parents bought me the video game for Christmas. So, we just need a massive stop.
Yes. You see, the video games industry changed a lot. So I'm 35. When I was 12, 14 years old, I used to play video games. I played, for instance, Medal of Honor. So that was a World War II setting. I was shooting the Nazis, the Germans, right? That was one. Then I was playing like Diablo 2. So I was a character playing, and I was about to defeat the devil, the Satan, right? But right now, especially these games like just you mentioned, the Grand Theft Auto, that's like a real life. You can do whatever you want. The open world is so big, you can find everyone over there. Regular people, police officers, hookers, prostitutes, everyone. There is some kind of quest that you have to do. You have to get a prostitute to do something with it. You have to steal that. You have to kill another mobster. That's like a real life imitation.
Yeah.
How can we do that? That's not normal. We didn't do that 30 years ago, but now we do that. So I can only imagine what we're about to do in the next 30 years.
Yeah.
We're going to take our virtual reality, augmented reality. They're going to do the same thing with just like in the real life.
Right. We're desensitizing the next generation on all these things, on sexuality, but then on violence. We're desensitizing. It's not a big deal. It's being normalized. And now you wonder why people are acting out when they get a little bit older. You wonder why there's all these school shootings. You wonder why sex buying is at an all-time high. Well, we've been training our kids for generations now, and especially in this last decade or two or three, we've been training our kids and desensitizing them to things that years ago would have been seen, no way we're doing that. And now the books and the things we're bringing into schools, I don't want to get off path here, but we are desensitizing and normalizing things that are harmful to other people, to vulnerable people.
It's interesting that you've mentioned, for instance, art, music, movies, etc. I can only imagine what would happen to Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, or the Prince 30 years ago if they would had that kind of lyrics that nowadays artists have. It would never be accepted.
Yeah.
Though that was a true music, real music. Right now, if we look into the lyrics, oh man, it's pervert.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And kids are listening to this.
Yeah. Yep.
How are we allowing this stuff?
And parents aren't monitoring for the most part.
They listen to those songs as well.
Well, a lot are, sure. Yeah.
Satan, rape, drugs, hood, all that stuff.
Yeah, every kid's walking around with the earbuds in their ear, and they're in their own little world. And what is being pumped into your kid's head?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a sub plot of my conversations with parents. Here's how you protect your kids. Monitor that stuff. Like, what's going in their ears? What video games are they playing? The kind of video games where you play and it's online and you're playing against other people, who knows where they are, well, some other part in the world, and then they got headphones on listening? Like, no.
You got no idea.
No, we're not letting our kid play that game with headphones on with other people. We don't know who they are. So this is parents have to step up, have to wake up. Parents have to wake up to the dangers that's out there. I've said this earlier in our conversation. What most parents don't understand is that the world, the dark underbelly of this world, is filled with predators. Now you can Google up any sort of National Geographic video or some kind of video that looks at the jungles in Africa or someplace. And so you just type in predators in the jungle or something like that. And there's probably a lot of videos. We've all seen some version of this. You see the lion. He's laying down low in the tall grass and he's waiting for that herd of zebra or antelope to run by. And then he's watching, right? There's a strategy to it. There's an instinct. He knows to be downwind. He knows to be hidden. He's planning, he's prepping to pounce on the easy prey. And the big, strong, confident animal that's leading the pack, he never jumps on that one. He sits and he waits. And pretty soon near the back of the pack, there's a little one that's a little lost, a little weaker, a little slower. Usually in those videos, he'll jump on that one. And that's his prey. The strong, confident, and aware ones are running on. The weak, slow, timid ones, the unaware ones, are falling behind. The exact same thing has happened in human form. There's predators out there online. There's predators around the schools. There's predators looking for not the strong, competent, aware young people. He's looking for those weak, slower, timid, unaware ones. Those are the ones, the vulnerable ones, that he's going to predator and pounce on those. So parents, we don't want it to happen to anyone. But you don't have control over everyone else's kids and their parenting. But you have control over who's in your house. Make sure your child is strong, confident, and aware of the dangers. Age appropriately, strong, confident, and aware of what's out there, of who the predators are. Excuse me. And make sure that your kid's at the front of the pack, not the back of the pack. Let's protect our kids. Let's start there. Can we just start there? Protect your kids in your home. If we got all the homes doing that, we're going to take a bite out of this heinous crime of trafficking because there's going to be less vulnerable kids.
So there's a very old video, I want to say from 1990s, where a predator is getting interviewed. So he got out of jail, and the reporter asks him how he gets the victims. He's saying, well, no internet in 1980s, right? So he said, I was going out and I was watching children playground, school, etc. I was watching her. Okay, so this one's got a father, single mother. Okay, single mom. How's the kid? He's like almost depressed. Okay, how's mom? Is she like this or she's like more depressed as well? Okay, I got you. This is the victim.
Yeah. Yep. They're geniuses at spotting the vulnerabilities, and they will pounce on that vulnerability.
Let's go to the traffickers right now.
Okay.
So a profile of a trafficker. It can be absolutely anyone as well, right?
It can be. It most often is the same life that the young victim has lived. Many of the traffickers have lived that same life, and they just went a different path. Living, a lot of them in an urban scenario. A lot of them, surprise, surprise, no dads in the picture. They're getting their cues and their leadership from the older boys in the neighborhood. Early on, they have to make money to pay the house bills. Maybe their mom is addicted to something. There's a lot of dysfunction and pain going on in that. And so that young boy, that 10, 12-year-old is looking at the 16, 17-year-olds in the neighborhood. They're making money. It started somewhere. Where's trafficker zero? I don't know. But he's looking at these other kids, and some of them are selling drugs, and some of them are selling girls, and there's a lot of money involved. And so that young trafficker oftentimes will follow that path of least resistance. He gets groomed by the gang. He gets brought in, and so that's a typical picture in an urban city, like a place like LA or New York or Miami. That's a typical scenario. But there's also the gamut. There's the higher end, well-dressed business approach, like Rachel's trafficker looked like a modeling agent, a three-piece suit. And so there's all of the above, but a lot of those traffickers are fighting for their lives. In the book, I sit down with a former trafficker, and he tells me his life story. And he was fighting for his life as a young kid in inner city San Diego. And that was the best, most lucrative option he had in front of him.
Yeah, but his opening line was what? I'm not a bad person. You know what? Fuck you.
Yeah.
You are a bad person. You had an option. Plenty of options.
Yeah. He didn't see him. He said, I'm not evil, and I wasn't when I was in the game either. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to process all that for
There's
sure.
no gray area. Let's not paint everything gray, black or white. You're a bad person. You sold people for sex.
Yeah.
Percentage-wise of traffickers, men and women, how many percent?
It's mostly men. I mean, I don't have an actual documented stat. It's mostly men, probably 95% men. And the women that are involved, they're usually partnered with a man. They're usually forced to be kind of his partner. A lot of times a male trafficker will be controlling, 2, 6, 8, 10 young girls, and one of them will rise to the top in kind of the hierarchy.
She's going to be the queen?
Yep, and she'll be the one, and all of them will be required oftentimes to go out and recruit other girls to come in, but there's one that kind of becomes the boss of the women, and in the eyes of the law, she would be considered doing trafficking, but she doesn't really have a choice, so it's hard to figure out what's what.
So we most of the victims are women.
Yeah.
Some of them can be traffickers. What about women buyers?
Yeah.
Do women buy?
They do. Not as much as men, mostly men, but women definitely will buy.
But they buy what? Adult men just to have sex like a gigolo? Or they buy minors or even girls to have some twisted sex?
Yeah. It's all of that. You can't rule out any scenario that you could mention right there. The biggest piece of that chart is adult men buying girls, either young minors or adults. But there are women buyers and there are women traffickers, just a much smaller percentage.
Do you have a distinction between prostitutes females and gigolos men? Is it the same thing for you or no?
We inside this work, we don't even use the word prostitute unless we're talking about a legal definition and some kind of a setting where that's the word they're using. There are people that are suffering from exploitation. They've been exploited.
Yeah.
And so some are men and some are women, but they're being exploited and sold in that way.
Okay, I got you. Trafficker and pimp is the same person? Or trafficker is the one who gets, for instance, a child from Nicaragua and get the kid to the U.S. That's the trafficker. The pimp is the one who is selling this kid on the street?
Trafficker and pimp is basically the same thing. It's just pimp is kind of the street name for it. Trafficker is the more legal name, the sanitized name. Now, you could talk about smuggling, human smuggling that might be happening and pulling but that would be a trafficker.
That's how it's called, smuggling.
That would also be a trafficker. So trafficker and pimp is basically the same word, just depends on who you're talking to.
Their study found that 88% experienced physical abuse while growing up. 76% experienced childhood sexual assault. 88% experienced domestic violence in the home. And 84% experienced drug, alcohol abuse in the home. So that's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
It's a non-stop vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Hurt people hurt.
Yep.
And it's not stopping.
Right.
And it's getting even bigger. The circle is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
You're right. Yep.
Let's go to the pornography.
Yeah.
I wonder how many men know that pornography has similar addictive characteristics as hard drugs and can be life-altering. Any data on that?
There's a ton of data. I'd refer your listeners to it's an online app called Fight the New Drug. They're on social media. There's also a website. And if you go to Fight the New Drug, they have all the stats on it. And there's a ton of stats that talk about what pornography does to the brain itself and begins to alter the brain. And it's not my area of expertise, but there's a lot of information out there.
It means you can't watch it occasionally once a month. If you start watching it, you're addicted to it. You're watching almost every day for a few times a day.
And like any other addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever it is, it always takes a little bit more to give you the same high. That's how addiction works. You get further and further down that path. And so pornography is just like that. So watching something once a week, a certain version of pornography won't be enough at some point. And suddenly it'll be twice a week or 3 times a week. And then it'll be longer amounts of time. And as addiction continues to progress, in this case, usually that means younger sites, younger victims, and more violent.
More pervert.
More perverse, more violent, younger victims. That's usually the way that addiction goes of pornography. And then pretty soon that person says, wow, it'd be really great if I could experience this in person. And so pornography is the on-ramp, oftentimes, to the physical form of sex buying.
So the movie The Sound of Freedom, that was based on a story of Tim Ballard. I was watching one of his podcasts, and he was displaying this kind of a route for a child molester. And he said that, first of all, you get some kind of a thought of doing this. Then you're like, no, the thought is bad. Then maybe the thought is not that bad. You think of it. Then he goes to watch some kind of videos of that. Then he's looking for some examples. Maybe this child, I could do this. And then he gets to do the action. Isn't that the same thing with pornography? At least, first, you watch regular porn, right? No violence. Then a little bit more violence. Maybe then threesome, foursome, group, something like that. Then maybe minors. And then when you can't get enough, you think of maybe I should practice this in real life. Why not?
Yeah.
Is that the correct route?
Yeah, that's a typical route. There's a friend of mine who has released, I think it's all done now, a strong series. If you can search Beyond Fantasy, an organization called Exodus Cry, Benji's the founder of that, has put out I think a 3-part series on pornography and addictions and those kinds of things. It's very good, very well done. So find Beyond Fantasy and online on YouTube, and you can check it out.
And the people that are addicted to this, they can be family members, family guys, having children, having wives, having regular sex with their wives. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And stats will tell us the first age of exposure, the age of first exposure, is about 8 years old here in this country. So you have 8 or 9-year-olds. Their brains aren't fully developed. They don't even know what they're looking at. And somehow, because somebody gave them a phone or whatever their access is, they're seeing pornography for the first time. And their little brain is already starting to get conditioned and rewired, and they're going down a dark path.
So in my childhood, for the first time I was exposed to the pornography, I want to say I was like 9 years old. Obviously no internet back then. That was a videotape. So we gathered at a friend's house. He showed his dad's videotape, right?
Yeah, right.
And I remember just like yesterday, that was a bit of a twisted sex, and I was like, that's not good. But I was 8 years old.
Right. Yeah. So there you go. 8 years old, and you're looking at something, you're not even sure what you're looking at, and it's changing your brain chemistry.
And it was not that available. So that was one videotape at this guy. So if you want to watch it, your parents should not be at home. You got to get the videotape, etc. At this moment, just like you said, with the phone, you buy it, you can call somebody, but you can watch porn 24/7. You can do it on your job while you work.
And that's what it's like. They poured gasoline on a bonfire when the internet and the technology is to what it is now. Now everything is accessible 24/7, all versions of pornography, and it's not hard anymore to see, and you can do it in private. And so you can have, rather than, kind of being in, your friend's bedroom, because that's where the VCR player is, that you watch that, and he kind of stole the tape. What time's my dad coming home? Like, all that is gone. The magazines, the Playboy magazines used to be in a store, but they were kind of up high, and there's a thing where you couldn't really see the pictures, and you had to be a certain age. Gone. Now anybody at any time, 24/7.
You can see those pictures right now on Instagram. You don't even have to pay for it. That's for free.
Yeah.
You know what's hard is the second chapter. So the pornography website known as Pornhub has 3.5 billion visits per month, more than Netflix, Yahoo, and Amazon. Porn is big business for sure. He points out that Pornhub rakes in money from 3 billion ad impressions a day. But what is the essence of this successful business? He states, yet there is another side of the company. Its site is infested with rape videos. It monetizes child rapes, revenge pornography, spy cam videos of women showering, racist and misogynist content, and footage of women being asphyxiated being choked in plastic bags. Choked in plastic bags?
And there's an audience for that. All those things. There's men and women. There's an increasing number of women, but again, my lane is to talk to men. There's a growing number of men that are watching all that and consuming it.
You watch when someone is being choked in a plastic bag.
And somehow, apparently, that is a turn on.
Okay, so the question is the following. If someone's right now watching and saying and thinks of, I like that kind of stuff, okay? Mm-hmm. I know that's not good, that's twisted, but I like that kind of stuff. Maybe he has some thoughts of doing harm to a minor, right? What are his options? If he goes and says to the police, I have these thoughts, what is going to happen with him?
I don't think anyone will get arrested for having thoughts. It's the actions that.
So it's just a matter of time when he's having his thoughts. He even came to the police and said, I have a problem, and they can't help him. So it's a matter of time when he gets to do action.
Well, in terms of getting arrested or criminalized, it's not a criminal to have a thought, but I would hope that given police department would have resources they would hand him and send him to some sex anonymous classes and there are services for someone who's struggling with pornography or whatever, alcohol, whatever it is. I would hope that they refer him to one of those, but they're not going to. There's not a criminal action. They would try to help him, I would hope.
Pedophilia is a disease, right?
I think so.
It's a mental disease.
Yeah.
Can it be cured?
I don't know enough about the psychology of that, and I mean, I'd like to think that we're all redeemable and can all be cured of whatever our struggle is. Not without a lot of hard work, though. They got that person with those thoughts has to do the work, and have all the therapy, and that person probably has had some trauma done to them at a younger age. They were probably a victim of pedophilia. It's going to take some intense therapy to get out of that, for sure.
Okay. What's the solution for pedophiles? Once they are getting caught, chemical castration, what to do with them? Because if they sentence for 10 years, 20 years, they get out, I believe a lot of them are thinking to do the same thing to minors. But if you chemically castrate them, you can do harm to minors without your genitals. Yeah. You can do harm to minors with all other body parts, other things, stuff, etc. So they almost can't be healed or cured.
Once again, this is out of my scope of complete understanding. Certainly there's a lot of people that would be more than happy with some version of castration for a pedophilia. I don't think that will ever fly in this country with human rights and all those things. There wouldn't. I can't imagine that being accepted, even for the worst version of that. They'd go to jail. Someone who's so far damaged down that path could be incurable with human remedies. I don't know.
But once child molester go to jail, inmates know why he is there. Yeah. His life is done.
Yeah, it won't go well for him inside that jail.
From one side, I would say, good for him. That's what he deserved. But on the other side, if he is sentenced to 10, 15, 20 years, it is supposed that he corrects himself in jail. But if he, as a child molester, gets to jail and he's being molested himself for 20 years, he's getting even more twisted when he gets out.
Yeah, I don't think prison is actually designed to rehabilitate anybody.
But it should.
It should.
Promise of that.
Absolutely, it should. That should be the place where they can get healthy. And I would imagine there's probably some resources inside there that they could take advantage of. I'm guessing. I haven't been to prison, so I don't know the exact ins and outs of what happens inside there. But it's probably designed to chew you up, not heal you. And it will depend on that person and the path that they want to take.
From the philosophical standpoint, do you think pedophiles were created by God this way, or they managed to become ones? Because you're a man of God, I know that.
That's a great question. I think that God created us all. I think that there's a broken world. Sin entered the world. Broken people imposed their brokenness on their young, like we've been talking about. Did God create someone as a pedophile? I would say no. I don't think he purposely created someone as a pedophile. I think maybe there's some internal leanings in a certain direction, just like someone not talking about pedophilia, there might be an internal weakness or leaning towards whatever you might say. And then the external environment reinforces it and fans that flame, or intervenes and says, that's not who we are, we're living this way. And I think it could be squelched at a young age with proper guidance. It's sort of like, you see the special needs community and someone with cerebral palsy, or, various forms of birth defects. Did God create that birth defect? That's a really great theological question. I think God is most interested in the internal, more so than the external. Certain things happen, a gene mutates, there's some kind of anomaly that could happen. Did God cause that to happen? I don't believe that God caused that to happen. What I do believe, that God takes all those things and works it out for good. God takes all circumstances and brings good out of them. Romans 8:28. It doesn't mean that he causes all circumstances. Some things happen because of the brokenness and the fall of man and the brokenness of this world. But the scripture is clear, and it says, but he causes all things to work together for good. So does God cause a pedophilia? I don't think God causes that. But he can work good out of it with the right circumstances and the right people and the right activity. Just like he can somebody. I have a colleague of mine, a dear friend, who had a Down syndrome baby about a year ago. Did God purposely make him a Down syndrome baby? I don't think that's the way it works. I think he allowed it to happen, and he's going to bring something beautiful and awesome out of that. And it's already happening. You can already see it in their family. Great question, though.
Are you familiar with Andrew Tate?
With what?
Andrew Tate?
I don't think so.
So Andrew Tate, I believe, for 2 years in a row, he's the most Googled human being on.
Oh, Andrew Tate. Sorry, yeah. I'm barely familiar with him.
So he's being alleged. He's being charged right now with that he is involved in human trafficking. Mm. But human trafficking, as they describe, they use this term. He's a human trafficker, and what he did is he managed to persuade women, grown-up women, adults, to do TikTok videos for him. Mm-hmm. That's how they said that he's a human trafficker. Do you think that these allegations is a bad eye for the human trafficking as it is? Because that's, in my opinion, that's not human trafficking when you persuade someone to do videos. It is way different than having someone getting on the street for him or her to have sex.
I'm not familiar enough with him to understand his specific case, but generally speaking, as a definition, if there's a commercial sexualization, and I don't know what those TikTok videos were, if there was an exchange of money, and there was some version, the federal definition uses force, fraud, or coercion for minors or adults. If he or anyone is having power over the subject through means of force, fraud, or coercion, and there's a commercial element, money is being exchanged for some kind of sexual activity, then he would be a human trafficker. Okay,
I got you. Alan, the problem is, as we figured out, and you write it in your book, the problem is the fatherlessness country, fatherlessness society.
Yeah.
How did this happen? After World War II, I want to say the whole Europe was almost maleless. A lot of died in the war. In the war, but the U.S. was involved actually, of course, in the World War II, but not big time like Europe was. How did fatherlessness occur in the U.S.?
I don't know. I don't know on the calendar when it really picked up steam, but I think I don't think there's one singular answer to that. I think there's an erosion of society. There's an erosion of humanity. There's a devaluation of basic morals and norms that had been celebrated, and there's a normalization of men out doing whatever it is that they want to do. And it's sort of like when was patient zero? Somewhere along the line, it began to pick up steam, and now we're in this snowball going down the hill. And different communities, that number is bigger than others, but I don't know how it really began. I just know that what we're living in right now, for men, there's a lack of accountability, and there's a lack of responsibility. And there's a gaining nature of entitlement, of self-centeredness. It's a godless society, and so people become their own gods. They attribute power to other people. I'm going to be like them, but that's not a good role model. So God has been taken out of society for the most part, taken out of schools, taken out of homes, and we now celebrate men, boys, young boys, doing whatever they want to do, and abusing other people now is getting, like we've talked about, getting normalized and getting celebrated, and it just gets passed down. There's a generational curse that's happening, and depending on what part of the city you're in or what part of the country you're in, that's a bigger problem than other parts.
What about the hippie movement? So 1960s, I want to say, right? 1960s, 1970s. At the same time, there was a nucleus family model, great model. Everything was great with it. But at the same time, the hippie movement arrived. So sex with everybody, my body, my choice. I can do whatever I want, as many sex partners as I want. No kids, almost child-free. Yeah. No job, no aspirations, no career, almost no purpose of life. So that... I want to say this is what started this whole movement. And you know what is funny? If we see all the trends that women are pushing right now, right? So feminism, right? Guys are all for feminism. I pay for myself in a restaurant, no problem. So 50-50, good. I can have sex with as many partners as I want. No problem. Guys like that. Why not? I want to have sex with you. I don't have to marry you. Incredible. So everything that women are, if I want, I can be a prostitute. I can be a sex worker. I can be working at a strip club. If I want, I can have my OnlyFans account. I can sell my pictures of my body for the money if I have the demand on it. No problem. Men that have money say, hooray, I'm good. I'm all for that. No responsibilities, no high standards. Sex is available as it has never been before. So what are they fighting for? That's vice versa. That's bullshit.
And our inner cities around our country, they're war zones, and a lot of men are getting killed off or sent to prison. And so this war zone that's happening, and this gang mentality, and the dangerous streets that are happening. So a lot of men are missing, like physically missing. They're in jail, or they're in the gang life and they're out, or they're dead. And so now you just have another generation of kids growing up without guidance, without a healthy role model in their life. And that there's a lot of different contributors to all of this problem.
So basically, it takes only one generation to be fatherless.
Yeah.
And the vicious cycle starts.
Yep.
If that started in 1950s or 60s with the hippies, for instance. That's it. We're good.
Yeah, it seems like it's probably historically, that'd be an interesting question to pose to some historian that studied that. It seems like it was picking up steam probably around that time, 70s and 80s.
Women became more promiscuous.
And all of it mirrored technology, started growing, and more stuff was available online and computers, and eventually the smartphone and all that kind of stuff. A couple of years ago when the Black Lives Matter movement was exploding around the country, the organization Black Lives Matter, one of their bullet points was to destroy the nuclear family. I forget the exact words they use, but they were, and they had a lot of eyeballs on what they were doing during that time. I don't know how much anymore. They were celebrating and giving permission to have black men and other men, but their focus was the black community. You don't need to be here. We don't need you. Well, the nuclear family is not important anymore. It's like, oh, wow, you literally just, you're giving permission to the black community, to black men, to be absent. That's the last thing that we need in our cities. That was tragic.
Do you think that's the calling from straight from the hell, from the devil, just to ruin the family?
Yeah, I do, actually.
That's straight up Satan shit.
I think that's the strategy. I think that's the enemy's strategy. Destroy the family, destroy men, weaken men, cheapen men, diminish men, remove men. I think that's the strategy.
Because this gap will not be not fulfilled, right? So in page 38, you have a great quote. So you say, a passive man creates a gap for men with poor intentions to fill.
Yeah.
So there can be a country without a president or without a king or something like this. Someone's gonna come to power. If all the powerful men are gone somewhere,
yeah,
someone who is very weak psychologically, physically, morally, they're gonna go and fill the gap. That's what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. And that's my challenge to all men. Weak, passive men. It doesn't matter if you're leading a country or leading an army or leading a company or just in your home. A weak, passive man creates a gap for strong men with bad intentions to step into and be a predator for your kid online and take over a community and lead things in a bad direction if it's filled with a bunch of passive men, unwilling to engage, unwilling to stand up. Strong men with bad intentions step into that gap. And that's why the world is the way it is right now.
Don't you think, Alan, that human trafficking or sex exploitation of minors and adults can be stopped because a lot of people that are involved right there are very powerful in the government, and they are the buyers, or they are the traffickers, or they're just getting their cut. 10% of that, no problem. Why should I stop it? Why should I catch myself?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. Is that sex trafficking goes as far as the rich and famous and the powerful are involved at some level. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them. This is a multi-billion-dollar. There's different stats, $100 billion a year. Pick your number. Different people have reported different numbers. Massive number of dollars exchanged. And yeah, people are getting cuts. People are involved. I don't know when this is going to air or whatever, but at some point, apparently there's going to publish the Jeffrey Epstein list of the people who went to his island. And it's rich and powerful people. And it's people that led countries and members of the royal family and other people that maybe you don't recognize their name, but they are influential leaders of the world. Apparently, we'll find out exactly, were involved in buying sex, oftentimes from minors. So yeah, it's going to be that's a big challenge. Is to get some good, strong men in those circles to stand up. We got to find some good, strong men that have power and influence like that.
But eventually it takes but eventually it takes only one man to stand up, right? But a very powerful man to stand up, to be in power. But 2024, the year just started. How many leaders with their opinions, strong opinions, godlike men can you name right now, or women? I would say like a few, maybe 5, maybe 10 max. Let's get back to 1960s. JFK, MLK, Muhammad Ali. Those were the voices, at least 3 of them. Those were the voices. Right now, athletes, they don't speak up. Yeah. They're so afraid to get their money right. They're so afraid to speak up that they're just hiding in the shadow. They don't have any opinion. They're not talking about those issues. They don't give a shit about the society. But MLK did. Muhammad Ali did when he was talking about the war in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. But right now, we are leaderless. We are fatherless, leaderless society.
A bunch of weak, passive, scared, timid men. And this phenomenon over the last couple of years is cancel culture. If you speak out, if you're an entertainer or an athlete or whoever, you get, quote, canceled. And there's this mob that is going to ruin your career and take your livelihood away. And a weak man will succumb to that. We need strong men, because there's bad men with bad intentions, strong men with bad intentions that are stepping into that gap. And people are afraid. There's too much fear. They're afraid of being canceled.
Yeah, but they're sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right, yeah.
I can understand a man who's living for paycheck to paycheck, and he's afraid to speak up. Yes. But these guys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And they're afraid.
And we look around the world and it's a complete disaster. That's why.
As I view the world right now, so men in power right now around the world are just those weak men that were bullied at school 50 years ago.
Yeah.
That are getting their revenge right now.
Yeah.
They hate people. They hate society. They hate God. Why did you create me that way? Why did you let this happen? Why did you let me being bullied that way? Why did you let me being raped and etc.? So now they're getting their revenge. And you can see right away, you can see from the face, from the stance, from the way they speak, from the way they stand, from the way they lead, that they were bullied at school big time.
Yeah.
Right now, they're just getting their revenge. That's it.
Yeah, and some of those men that you're describing aren't multimillionaires, but they're buying guns and they're shooting into an open crowd, and they're at schools or at nightclubs because they're hurt and their brokenness and their vengeance is playing out in that way, and others are just leading down a path in the place where they live and where they're working. It's broken, hurt men. It's this broken record. How many times we said some version of that in the last hour? That's the problem. And that's where we need good, strong men to stand up in every space. A good, strong man to stand up and make a change.
So in the book that you have recommended, in your book, by Robert Lewis, he explains the Jeffrey Dahmer's example. So he says that father has never been in the picture of Jeffrey Dahmer as well. Mm-hmm. So fatherlessness creates not only that kind of criminals, it creates serial killers, maniacs, power-striving people that go to and become government officials, and then they get the power and they do whatever they want. So fatherlessness is, I believe, the biggest problem right now. Mm-hmm. Let's get to the problem solving. How can we solve this? I know you have a whole chapter in the book, but not all of the viewers gonna read the book. Let's get to the problem solving. How can we solve problem with fatherlessness, human trafficking, and of course, sex, minors, adults, and etc.?
Well, I don't know if we said this or not, but we created a little website around this book called fightforme.net, and that's where you can buy the book. But there's also other resources there. There's biographies of the contributors, and there's just more information to get part of the conversation. There's an email that goes out once in a while from that account. So I'd invite everybody to go to fightforme.net, get the book, but then also just step into this, lean into it all, learn more, and you'll find a way for you to get yourself to get involved. Like you said, there's a bunch of information in the book. The short answer to how do we solve trafficking, which we've been saying it probably a number of different times already. Good, strong men becoming more aware, understanding what it is and what it isn't, get it. So get educated, read the book, go on the website, watch some videos, go to savinginnocence.org, organization I work for. There's videos there that will help fill in some of the blanks. And then look for a place for you to serve in the way that you already are. Like I tell men all the time, you don't have to go back to school for 4 years and learn something new necessarily. Get a little more educated, read a book or two, but something that you're already doing. Like, for example, you have this podcast. You didn't start this podcast so that you could talk about human trafficking. You have the podcast. You already have the equipment. There's some lights and cameras and things, and you're inviting me to come in and talk about it. Great. You're already using what you already do, your skills and your abilities. You're already using it for good. So I would challenge men to find out what they do. Some men are graphic designers, and you can help an organization create their new flyer that they need for anti-trafficking. Some men are skilled at making videos. They're in the motion picture industry or the entertainment industry. Use some of your gifts and talents. Make a video. Make a great, compelling video that gets shown online about anti-trafficking stuff after you learn a little bit. Find out what you can do and then do it. That's what we need, and we need it all. Now, in the process, there's kind of the macro and the micro, and I do go through that in the book. Kind of that bigger picture macro is, let's look at laws. Let's create laws. Let's allocate more funding towards anti-trafficking work from a federal level. Let's vote people into office that understand this, that back up what we're doing because we need their support. Let's do all those things. There's a bunch of them in the book. And then the micro, and this is the part we've talked about. Look in the mirror. The chapter talks about looking in the mirror. We have to make sure our life, before we do anything outward, we have to make sure that our life is synced up with an anti-exploitive culture. We have to live in such a way, spend our money in such a way, lead our family in such a way that is in line with a non-exploitive culture. We're not going to patronize music and entertainment and movies and places that are in the business of exploiting other vulnerable people. And we're going to lead our family that way. So we're going to look in the mirror. We're going to make sure our life is in order. Like, we can't be looking at porn, because that's an exploitive behavior. We've already talked about that. You can't be going to the strip club, guys, because that's an exploitive behavior. You can't definitely be looking up and buying sex from somebody out there, but then it's bigger than that. So now how are we going to do that? We're going to get involved with our family, with our community. We're going to lead our little boys and our little girls. That's the long route. Our little boys and our little girls. Our girls are not going to be victims. They're going to be strong, confident, and aware. Our little boys are not going to be buyers and traffickers. They're going to be strong, confident, and aware. They're going to understand the value of humanity. They're going to understand the value of women and sex. It's something that should be celebrated. And we're not going to let the normalization of abuse creep into our home. No, that's not normal. Sit on the couch and watch TV with your kids. Don't use TV as a babysitter all the time. Sit with them. Interpret the world that's coming to them on a daily basis, on a moment. If they're old enough to have a phone, look at that stuff. What are they looking at? What are the websites? What are the apps? We need dads and moms, but we need dads to engage in this world that's happening, because it's happening in a painful way, and it's luring our next generation down that path in a real practical, tangible way. Guys, get on your website, search human trafficking agency near me, wherever city you are in, and probably one or two will pop up, people that are in the work. Go to their website, find out how many staff they have. Go to the store and buy a Starbucks gift card for everybody that's in that work and in your city. Send them a card, a gift card. Write a little note cheering you on. Thanks for all your work. Shows up in the envelope. They don't know who you are. And suddenly there are 10 staff that are there slugging it out 24 hours a day. They're going to be, wow, someone sees us. Like, everybody that just heard me say that can do that. You can do that, and to be part of the solution. See yourself as part of the solution. We're not a passive bystander. Get off the couch. Get in the game. Do something. And we can see human trafficking come to an end. It's a big task. That's why we need every man to be involved.
And some of the things that you've mentioned, Alan, are not that hard to do. For instance, it's not that hard not to listen to the rap music. 99% of the rap music is shit.
Yeah.
Lyrics are bad. It's not that hard to stop listening to that music.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to teach your kids to the real music, right? So Whitney Houston, the classic music, so the Prince, Michael Jackson, everything else. That was music. Celine Dion, that's music. Andrea Bocelli, that's music. Not that rap, mumble rap. That's not music. That's not art. So the last question on my podcast is always the same. Let's have two assumptions with you. Assumption number one is the President of the United States is the most powerful human being on planet Earth. Assumption number two is you become one. Once you become the President of the US, the Secret Service comes to you and says, hello, Mr. President, congratulations. We love you. We're on your side. We, as a Secret Service, know all the answers in the world, right? We know everything. And now all this information is available to you. What would be your first question?
Wow. I would probably start by saying, write down on this piece of paper or computer, I want to know who else is on my team. I want to know who is on the team. Who can I count on? Who's going to back me in the decisions that we're going to make? Let's find out who's in the same uniform. and then we could chart a plan after that. I'd probably start there. Find out who's on the team.
That's great.
Yeah.
Peers.
Yeah.
I want to end this podcast with two quotes.
Okay.
So the most trending podcast or interview right now on the internet on YouTube is the one that Club Shay Shay did with the stand-up comedian Cat Williams. And then on that podcast he said, winners are not allowed to allow losers to rewrite history. That was a great quote. And the second quote that I would like to end up this podcast is from your book, page 100. Edmund Burke once said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Let's start from themselves. Alan, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do. I believe that's super crucial what you're doing right now. It's super important to speak up, not to be afraid to speak up. Mm-hmm. And just like you said, use all your resources. Whatever you do, you can contribute to stop this mess, this nightmare, this hell on earth.
Yeah.
God bless you. God bless all your kids, your wife, everyone that is being loved by you. So God bless you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.